Hey guys, Kevin here from the Strictly Broken TCG team, and today with me I have Mr. Yoomin Kim, also part of the Strictly Broken TCG team. You want to say hello?
Hello, I am part of the Strictly team, and today I'm going to be bringing you a decklist video.
Yep, so Yoomin is now a two-time North American WGP Nationals winner, winning last year with Quintuplets and this year again with Quintuplets, but with set 2.
Yes, the set 2 gave it a huge buff, and I think the set is very good right now, probably top 3 decks easily.
Very strong. I know a lot of people also rated this deck quite highly. So, do you want to start off with the level zeros and go card by card?
Yes, so starting off the deck, I have 4 Nino runners. It's a 3/5 setter runner, and the condition for the power being if I have another character. So the condition itself is a little bit harder than like let's say a 5 or more, but I think it's still pretty good. And having a plussing level 0 in the standby deck feels really good since you keep plussing, you keep applying pressure to your opponent's field, and if your opponent wants to deal with it, unless they have the perfect card to counter it, they're gonna have to invest 1 or 2 cards, and that's more cards that they swing with, more damage you take, so you can get to level 1 faster and snowball from there. So I think a runner is always just good to have in a deck because like plussing at level 0 feels so good.
You always want to see it.
Yes.
Alright, next card.
So now moving on, we have 3 Ichika Rikis, and Ricky's self-explanatory, and the second effect being a on play I can scry, just put it on top of waiting room, and this card just helps me grab key cards in my deck, such as like the bounce card, such as my brainstorm, or sometimes if I want to level up, I can grab the 1/1 and just hard play it because this deck presents a lot of power early on where I want to keep applying pressure, so playing a 1/1 from my hand doesn't feel as bad as other decks. And this card is just good, and it's also a yellow fix for my early plays and for my 3/2.
Alright, for those who don't know what Rickies are, because you're quite new to the game, Rickies are when this card is placed on stage from hand, you can pay 1, clock yourself 1 from the top of your deck. If you do, search your deck for a level 1 or lower character. All translation will be shown on the top right there. Okay, you want to continue on?
Moving on, I have 2 of the Ichika Climax Swappers. It's also on play, I can put a card from my hand to stock. This card offers a lot of utility and it can allow for some very niche plays where I want to Ricky on my first turn, I can put a card and I can Ricky grab a runner, grab a bouncer, grab anything I want. And this card is also Climax Swap. It makes my combo turns a little bit more consistent. And having a Climax Swap just feels really good. Also, it's a 2k body, so I don't feel as bad playing it because they're gonna have to deal with it either way.
Yeah, a lot of utility cards are either 2k itself or lower than that. Alright.
Yes. Moving on, I have 2 of the Nino Bounce on play Climax Bounce. I think this card is probably one of the most broken in the set. This card is when you play from hand, you can shuffle 2 characters back, and you can give a soul to one of your other characters, so you can constantly apply pressure on your opponent with the damage. And when I play Climax onto my Climax area, I can bounce, give another one of my characters 1k and the ability of when that character attacks, look at top 2, and then put 1 on top and put 1 to waiting room. So I can check my triggers, I can give it extra power for more pressure. So and this card is just really good, especially in standby, since with standby I want to climb over walls, I want to apply more soul pressure. Since the climax doesn't actually have a soul on it,
Yeah, the climax.
so I can swing for big
Yeah,
normals.
standby climaxes do not give characters soul, so this card helps you get that lacking soul damage compared to other decks.
Yes. And this card just works so well with a finisher that I'll talk about later.
Sounds good.
Moving on, I have first of all, the spicy tech, the Itsuki coin flip. I personally really like this card and I wanted to cut down on my deck just so I can run the specific card. It's a coin flip. Coin flips are self-explanatory, and the second effect being when I play this from my hand, I can pay 2 to bounce one of my opponent's cards. This card later in the game, when I see it, I feel like I can win board anytime because I can bounce one of my opponent's field, and that makes them lose power, that makes them lose like field, so I can swing for more damage, and this kind of just disrupts your opponent's field. And since like especially when I'm versing standby decks where they have hand down core, I can just hard remove it, and playing a 2/2 from your hand feels really bad. So or I can bounce like a back row 2k assist, and this card just feels really good. Since I can, if I open with it, then I can just use it as a coin flip. And obviously it's not guaranteed to plus, but it's a potential plus, and plusing, like I said, at level 0 feels really good.
Yeah, sometimes you just plus their... You can bounce their character in the front row, swing with this, and then maybe get another plus off of it back to hand.
Yeah, like you can pay 2 bounce, you can hit off the coin flip, play it again, pay 2 bounce. Like your opponent's field is probably gone by that point.
Alright, sounds good.
So moving on, we have 2 Nino Brainstorms here. It's a self-tap salvage Brainstorm, and the second effect being that when I reverse my opponent's character, I can pump 500. And I like this Brainstorm in this deck because I can keep brainstorming since my back row slots are usually free, since my level 2 target at level 1 with the standby comes onto the front row and stands right away. So my back row slots are a little bit more lenient, so I can have this in the back row. Continuing to brainstorm, continuing to pump power feels really good with this deck, since I want to like climb over high walls, especially against another standby deck. So I chose this Brainstorm.
Alright, I know some people, when they play this type of deck, they like the Ichika new Brainstorm. The Ichika Brainstorm,
Yes.
which mills 5s and then also can net an additional 4. Thoughts on that?
Yes. I think the milling in a standby deck definitely helps, but the only thing that's keeping me away from that Brainstorm is the condition of the Brainstorm, since it only grabs Ichika cards if I do hit. So, and since I don't run a lot of Ichika cards in this deck, I feel like the Brainstorm effect becomes kind of redundant, and it's only used for like a sack itself. Look at top 4, and I think the utility this card provides, especially if it's in the back row, your opponent has to constantly play around it, since they need to be mindful of when they crash their field, because that sudden 500 power can make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds
So,
good.
finally, the level 0 lineup to round it out, I have a hand fix Nino. Say on play, I can ditch a card and then top check and then salvage for the level of that top checked card. Also, I can ditch another Nino to draw one. So I think compared to like a traditional cowgirl card where you top check and add, I think this card is much better for utility wise, since I can always grab a level 0 if I need. I can always grab like the bouncer card, I can always grab a brainstorm, I can grab the coin flip if I need to, and this card reveals your trigger so you can know what you trigger. So if you see climax, you can brainstorm, you can shuffle back, and this card just offers a lot more situational value, I think.
One of the downside of this card being its 500 base power.
Yeah, so the power is a little bit smaller, and I think that might become a problem later on, especially in the late game. That's why I run 3 instead of 4. I think 4 could be good as well, but later down the line, if you draw this card in the late game, then you feel like your hand's clogged kind of. And I kind of built the deck around cards that like I always want to, the cards that I don't feel about drawing. So cards like this, cards like the brainstorm. It's like when I draw them, I feel like that's like not as bad as drawing like a burner card that I used once.
Nice. Okay. That is it for the 0 lineups.
So going into the level 1 lineup, I only have 6 cards for level 1. And to start it off, I have 4 of the 1/1 typical standby target. So 2 or more, it gets 2k, and it has hand encore. So if I open with it, I'll ditch it and then standby it out. It kind of builds field early on, and it's a 7/5 body, very typical in a standby deck, in an 8 standby deck actually. So, and just since I think with this deck specifically, I can, against other standby decks that run 1/1, I can kind of scale over it a little bit because I have that brainstorm, I have that bounce effect to pump 1k, so I don't feel as bad playing against other standby decks since I can just present more power on attack.
Yeah.
So the last remaining level 1s are these backups. Reason I run the Yotsuba backup instead of another Itsuki is because I do not have another Itsuki, so this Yotsuba was not by choice, but these 2k backups offer a lot of value, especially with these 1/1s. If I can win on defense with a standby deck, I feel like I'm winning the game pretty much. Like with standby decks, a true standby deck should be able to win on offense and defense, and this running 2 of the backups can just help me do that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't really respect 2k backups these days.
Yeah, I think just like a random 2k backup to win a field can be the difference between like snowballing your opponent and like just losing the field and you have to hand out with them.
Yeah. What has the green card ever came up as an issue, or not at all?
Personally, for this national run, no, because like since I don't need color condition to play it, and if I see it, if I open with it, then I'll probably just keep it, depending on the matchup. If my opponent's running like an on reverse combo, or they have 1/1 bodies that reach like 8k, then I'll probably just keep these two if I see them.
All right. Have you ever
And the
played?
color of
Oh,
it, okay, go ahead.
yeah, no worries. Have you ever thought about? Have you ever tried running the 1/1 Adachi, the Itsuki one, or the 1/1 Nino that can't be reversed by cost 0? Thoughts on those?
Um,
Or have you not
I
tried them?
think those cards. I think the Dachi itself is really good, but in this deck where I already have the 2/2s that attack for 12Ks, 13K if I with the climax, I felt like it wasn't really needed. And secondly, I didn't have enough deck space to actually run those cards.
Mhm.
I think the Nino 1/1 can't be reversed by cost 0 is really good, but with a meta that's filled with so many standbys and like just cards that can swing over it,
Mhm.
I am plussing with the card, but I feel like I'm not actually killing things with that card. So
Hmm.
I feel like, and the main problem is it doesn't have hand on core. Of course, like it doesn't die against 1/0s, but I feel like the running the 1/1s have much more value, and I'll rather flex those spots to like a 2k backup.
Yeah, we'll talk about your matchups later on from the nets. All right, we'll be done
Yep.
with level 1. We'll go straight into level 2.
Yep. Heading into level 2, I have the Nino combo. This card is kind of like what I call cheating the standby system, where you kind of slowly build your field and attack for big power on the turn after. Because a traditional standby deck, I think you stand by the 2/2 in the back. Next turn, you stand it, bring it up, remove your opponent's field. But with this card, you can just bring it out right away. Attacks for 13k if you do the climax combo, and it can pretty much at level 1. I don't think anything can defend against this card. Anything like at level 1, if there's a 13k body on the field, and that's just like your opponent's cheating pretty much. And this card just is it's just so good since you can just play like a runner, you can play the 1/1 and have this, and suddenly your field is like AK7535 so early on without having to spend like much hand, spend much stock. And this combo, having hand on core, it is a little bit weak on defense, and having that hand on core makes it really good since I can just hand on core and gets 5k during my turn. So even without the combo, it attacks for 12k. I can pretty much 90% of the time beat over any lane. And this card just feels good since it does come out right away. So if I don't feel as bad if my opponent reaches level 1 first, then they set up their field, because I know if I have this combo, I can always run over one lane.
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite parts about this set too. This deck, it's just so
Yeah.
big, so strong.
Yeah, and then moving on, I have one of the Nino set 1 anti-change counters. I think having an anti-change counter in a standby deck feels really good because it applies pressure, mental pressure on your opponent. Because if they see it, they're gonna be like, "Wow, he has an anti-change counter." So if I put out my early plays, or like if I stand out a card, that it can potentially go away, since if I just anti-change it. And I kind of treat this anti-change kind of like a money counter, because if my opponent swings with the level 3 at level 2, then I could just anti-change it and it does no damage. And worst case, it's a 2/5 backup. And the anti-change condition and cost is actually fairly cheap.
Yeah, this one requires you to have a lot of board, but you can usually present board because you're swinging at huge numbers anyway.
Yeah, and like I said, worst case, it's a 2/5 backup. It helps my field live a little bit longer. And this card is like a very good tech card where it kind of forces my opponent to play around it. Like in my top 4 game, in my top 8 game, I'm pretty sure. My Mushoku opponent kind of played around this card because he knew I had it, so he sided all the lanes. And that kind of gave me the advantage comeback.
Mm-hmm. Alright, sounds good. Alright, your last of your level 2s.
And the very key card to this deck is this -3 soul counter. I think a good standby deck should always have at least one defensive tool, and in this case being the -3 soul counter. It's obviously not as good as like a traditional money counter, because money counter blocks every single damage, but the -3 soul counter, I think it's sufficient, since it could also choose another character that's not in battle. So for example, against like the Mushoku matchup, if my opponent swings with another lane instead of the Gallane, I can put the -3 soul on the Gallane, since I can choose another character.
Mm-hmm.
And this card is so good because I can control damage at level 2. If my opponent's playing a finisher turn, I can -3 soul counter to potentially live another turn. And I
If
think
you want
this
like stay
card,
at 2, you can use it too.
yeah. And since it's a level 2, I can play it at a level 2, stay at level 2 a little bit longer, especially if my opponent's like swinging, like crashing in their field, and I can mitigate damage while keeping my field. Then that's just, it feels really good to have this counter.
For sure, for sure. Alright, lastly, we have the level 3s. Alright, which one do you start
So
with?
starting off the level 3 line, I have 2 of these Nino standby target. It's a global 1/5 to the front if it's in the front row, and whenever I play climax, I can top check 2 rearrange, and I can give another character the ability of on attack top check 2, keep one on top, someone to waiting room, and this card is a very good standby target. If I can standby that, I will, because it gets that extra power and has that utility of when I put another climax, I can check my triggers. I can give another character the on attack top check 2 ability, which I think is personally really strong, and just that extra 1/5 just puts so much pressure on your opponent, because suddenly this card included becomes 11/5, my 2/2 becomes like 8/5, my 1/1 becomes 9k, and if I have like level 3s, my early play becomes 12/5, with the back row becomes so big. And if I have 2 of these, I'm pretty much like chilling, and I'm pretty much just chilling. My field's not gonna die.
Yeah,
And
13k
this card,
each if you have 2 up
yeah.
before any back rows.
If Ideally, I do want to stand by this on the front, so if I like trigger on my trigger step, then I'll stand by this card out and feel really good, because it's gonna put pressure on my opponent to get rid of it, or else this card's gonna keep staying on field. It's gonna keep having that global 1/5 to the front row, and if I play climax, I can get more value with it. So I personally really like this card, and it's a 2 of.
Alright, sounds good. Now
So
the main
before I
core.
get to my sure, I'll introduce that first. And this is the card that makes this deck kind of function a little bit better. It's a 3/2 Nino, so on play heal, and during my turn it gets 4k, so it attacks for 12/5, which is considerably big, so it kind of makes up for that weak power and defense. And when I have this specific climax in my climax area, this card itself, when I trigger it, it becomes a standby trigger. So randomly, while I'm attacking with this climax, I can randomly just trigger standby and make my board huge, like with this. And another power play that I mentioned before with this deck is that at level 2, if I have like maybe 3 or 4 cards left in deck, I could shuffle 2 of these from my waiting room into my deck, and suddenly I have 2 more triggers, standby triggers in my deck, so it can help me build field a lot more. And so these two just work so well together. And obviously the finisher effect, another very good finisher at the end of attack, pay 1, ditch 1, burn 3, which essentially makes it like a ditch 1, burn 3, since you already attack with this, so the stock is not a problem. And overall, like this finisher with the standby deck, it's just it's cracked. It's like not much more to say about it.
Yeah, this brings on the meme where everyone calls this the 12 standby deck instead of 8 standby, just because this card is
Yeah.
also standby trigger. So strong.
Yeah, this core engine is what makes the deck worse. I strongly believe that like if this card didn't exist, then this deck wouldn't be as good.
That's for sure.
Yeah, and so moving on, I have 3 of the Ichika back row. It's a 2k assist to front, and whenever I play a card from my waiting room onto my stage, I can activate 3 times per turn. I can pump a soul to my other character. So this is like just a generic 2k assist, plus having that extra soul makes this deck feel so much better, since I can like swing for more exact numbers. I can choose not to pump the soul, and like this card, it's a 3-up because I feel like necessary that at level 2 I should be standbying out this card at level 2, since it offers so much value. If I trigger another standby, I can pump a soul, apply pressure, and at level 3, if I have these 2 cards in the back, and my opponent's at like say like 3-4, and I'm swinging for 2, if I trigger standby or something, then I can just suddenly pump a soul, and I can choose the side, I can choose the front. And when the going gets tough, when it can't present a finisher, and I have a climax in my hand, then I can like push up level 0s, shuffle back, give something a soul, play climax, give something another soul, and suddenly like with my level 0s, I'm swinging 2/2/2, and that just feels so gross. If I was playing against it, like I would feel like pretty garbage playing against it.
Alright.
Like I would be thinking to myself, like, why does this exist?
It's also more healers too, so if you ever do
Yeah, it
hard
also
play,
heals, which is like the cherry on top.
not a horrible hard play character.
Yeah. So
Alright.
finally, last 2 cards in my deck is this Ichika early play. And I personally really like this card in this deck since I think a 2 or less condition for a standby deck is much better than a 4 or more, since that sometimes like your field doesn't die and you have to play over it, which doesn't feel bad, but I think 2 or more feels much better. It's also an 11k heal to stock healer, and I think like 2 or less 11k stock healers are very underappreciated, since with the standby deck it's already an 11k body on its own, and with the back row it suddenly becomes 13k. So it's a massive body on the field that can heal, and since it's a heal to stock, if I have this card or like this card in my hand, I can play it, ditch it, and then stand by them out, which offers for very niche plays.
Yeah, always love to see it. I know one guy in Strictly Broken doesn't really like stock healers, but I think it's still quite good, especially in standby for those cases where you want to discard standby targets
Like
already in hand.
there's the argument in like the stock healer versus like regular healers in standby, but I think for this deck specifically, like having these cards in your hand doesn't feel bad because this card exists.
Yeah, for sure.
I think like because I'm pretty sure regular healers don't peak at such high power.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I have to look up on that, but I believe there's some 11k, but it's not as common.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
like I know ReZero has one, and that ReZero has like a 3k support, so like it's suddenly 14k, and that was why ReZero was like a pretty good deck.
Yeah. All right, you want to talk about your matchups a bit?
Yeah, like the going into the Swiss rounds, I went 5-0.
Really strong, really good. I think you went 9-0 today?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, the whole tournament?
Yeah.
Undefeated record.
Yeah, that feels really good. It's a huge accomplishment. The notable matchups I faced, I think going into Nationals, I knew that with the banning of like Kaguya and Symphogear, there was going to be a lot of Mushoku because I strongly believe that Mushoku is the best deck in the format right now. Or before I did. Right now, I'm a little bit iffy on it. But Mushoku going into level 1, if they play standby with the Heiresses, the field is 8-5. And like even with the standby deck early on, if you don't set up properly, unless you have the perfect game, it's really hard to kind of climb those walls with those 8-5s. And so like going back, like the 2-2, this helps me like beat those characters. And since the Heiresses don't have hand down core, like this stays on field and this hand down core, so I can kill one Heiress and then hand down core kill another Heiress. So that Mushoku matchup kind of went like that. My opponent just he had a really good start where he standbyed the Heiress, and then going into level 1 he had 2 of them with the back row, but then with some like adjustments I had the Nino 1-1 plus this and a Brainstorm and the Bouncer, so I can actually like climb over 2 of them since I pump 1k to the middle and then pump 500 from the Brainstorm, so 9k versus 8-5. And this is why like I run the 2k backups sometimes, because even against like Mushoku, like the 9k beating A5 on your field just feels really bad because that 500 power it's like just because of 500 power you lost the field.
Yeah, I think Quince does have a pretty good matchup into Mushoku, which is
And
one of the more
like
prominent decks
specifically why I kind of chose to play this deck, because I knew this deck was good, but then since Mushoku was everywhere, I kind of played it.
Yeah, Symphogear and Kaguya dies, more Mushoku, expect this to have better performance.
Yeah. And in the second round I versed against Sololi, and I knew like how strong their finisher is, so I wanted to rush them as fast as possible. So at level 0 he was at like 0-5, and then I knew that I had a 1-1 in the back, so I tri-lane level 0s and got him to like 1-4, and then from there like I kind of allowed him to get a couple reverses on my field, because at that point like I wasn't really scared of him getting hand. I was more scared of like him getting like slowly setting up the stock for that finisher turn, because I know how lethal that finisher can be. So against Asolo I just played really aggressive.
Def rep the Myosoul counter for the restander.
Yeah, I did. In the end, like it was a very quick game where he kind of just leveled up very fast since I kept like pumping soul and everything. And at level 3, he went to level 3 with like 3 stock, and he couldn't really do much.
Alright, sounds good. Round 3?
I versed a lot of round 3. Can't really remember, but I remember like the only sets I versed was like Assault Lily, Bushoku, Hall 11 Quintuplets,
Alright,
and one Niji.
Would you talk about
Um,
your Whole Live matchups? Was it just one
Hololive
Whole
matchup.
Live, or
I
you played a
think
bunch of Whole Lives? I know there's a lot of
I
Whole
played three
Lives.
Hololive
Yeah, there's
players.
so many Whole Live players in this tournament.
Like one of them played. I versed. Who was it? Who was it? I versed. I forgot who it was, but he was playing Choice Gate, a Marine finisher at Cordon level 1.
Mhm.
And so that was, yeah. And so the one game, it was like probably the most sweating I have done in the game in this tournament, because I was at like 2-6. I refreshed with 5, and then I double triggered off the top deck. So I was like, wait, I have 3 left in deck and like 25 cards. And so he's at 3-6. I'm like, if he clocks, because he canceled with the gate, so he was out all gates, but he had 9 cards in hand. But he had 2 Subarus in hand, so like he could have milled his deck, played triple Marine, and just found the gate. And if he did that, I'm pretty sure I was dead, because even though I had 2 minus soul counters in hand, like Marine finishers are so strong. And so I was kind of sweating in that game, but he chose to sandbag instead of playing his finisher, so that kind of gave me leeway to double Nino and finish him off. I think Hololive definitely has like a decent matchup against this deck, since Hololive like does its own thing, and since the finisher is really strong.
Yeah,
I didn't play against like the Rusia combo. I played against 3 Hololives and none of them played the Rusia combo for some reason.
Okay, I see. Yeah, I think Rusha was actually the most represented Whole Live deck, so it's quite surprising you didn't see any of them. But I
Yeah.
guess none of them was hitting that undefeated record like you were.
And I played against the Quince as well. He was playing 6 standby 2 pants, a very spicy build.
I think
And
that was like
something,
a Nino waifu build or something.
yeah, it was. He played the level 3 pants, and like I didn't notice at first, but he triggered a pants on his first attack. So I was like, whoa, calm down there, man. It was interesting to see. I think the deck idea itself was actually like pretty solid, since you can stand by the Ninos and like you can restand at level 2 to like keep applying pressure. But I think 8 stamp overall is just a better deck, just because it's more consistent.
Yeah, I think that can't afford to run much of the huge the 2T that you play, the huge ones.
Yeah,
They end up
since they
playing
only
the
play
TV.
two of this climax, so.
Yeah, so it's not as consistent.
And then
The level 1 board is like slightly weaker.
yeah, and I versed 2 Mushokus. Actually, I versed 3 times. I versed 2 Mushokus in Swiss, and then in the top 16, I faced the same guy that I beat in Swiss. And
Doom
it was
come
like
dirty.
the matchup in the Swiss round, like the anti-change counter came very clutch. He early played, and then I anti-changed his early plays. So in the top 16 round, like he played his early play, but sided all lanes.
Making him spooked out there.
Yeah, so like he swung for like 1-1-0, and I was out, so I was like, okay, I'll 100% take that trade. My field doesn't die. Your field is kind of big, but my Nino is swinging for 14k because I have this, so I don't really care.
Alright, and I think you said you played against Nijigasaki. I think you played against all the like the top meta decks that people must.
Yeah, Nijigasaki in top 4.
Yeah.
It was very tough to defend against his board, because he kept triggering. He presented like 3 1-1s at the beginning of the game with 2 of the 2k whenever you trigger 2k back rows.
Yeah.
He
That's
played one
like
from
a
hand,
very scary
standbys. Yeah.
board.
So like, I had this in the middle with 2 of the back rows here, and he killed it.
Yeah, oh Jesus. I think wait, that's like
16-5.
16-5?
He
Oh my
climbed,
god.
yeah. And then like suddenly he triggers like 4, and then since he has double back row, every trigger he pumps 4k, and
Yeah.
then like suddenly his field is like 20k. I was like, okay, man.
So nasty, dude.
Yeah, Nijigasaki definitely is a scary deck. The only problem with it is like it's obviously weak on defense, but hand on core makes up for it, I think. And the Setsuna was really scary.
Yeah, because it doesn't
Because,
even
like-
front row either.
Yeah, he actually didn't like have a finisher turn, or like a realistic finisher turn. I was at 3-0. I just finished swinging, and I have 2 Ninos in hand with the climax. So I was like, okay, he's out like 5, and he has like 20 cards in left in deck, so I can probably finish him off. And then he like slams zeros in the front field and slams the Setsuna climax. I'm like, that's fine. He standbys at 1 Setsuna, triggers another climax, standbys another Setsuna, and suddenly he burns 2-2 at the end.
Yeah, that's scary, dude.
And then I went to 3-6, and I was like, okay, I finish him or I die. And then I had double Nino plus the Ichika here, and then he had 5 climaxes left in deck, and he canceled 3 of them, so it was kind of scary.
But you clutched out in the end.
Yeah, he like it wasn't likely that he would have lived, but like just him canceling like on 3s and 2s, I was like, okay, man, this guy's kind of good. This guy's
That's
kind
Weiss
of
Schwarz.
OP. Yeah, so the Nijika-Saki matchup was definitely tougher than a lot of the matchups since they can scale my field.
Do you think Nijisaki was your hardest matchup?
Yeah, I think so. And in the finals, I versed the Gen 5 Hololive variant TD.
Yeah,
It was
it
a
was
very interesting deck.
crazy how like deck got quite far.
Yeah, I think like the deck itself, I don't think it's like that bad. I think if you like hit on the finisher, because the Polka like pay 1 burn 3 is actually pretty busted. So I think if you like play your cards well, and you also play like the Suicide play and the Noeller play, and I think those 2 cards alone can like carry the deck pretty far.
But I heard
Yeah.
he didn't have that much. He had a pretty unfortunate game against you or something.
Yeah, like he dual laned at level 1, and then like I was out a lot of climaxes early on, pretty much. I was out like 6, and I went to level 1, so I was like, if he tri lanes and slams climax, I might go to level 2. And suddenly he just dual lanes and then slams a climax, I was like, okay. And I cancel 1, I was like, okay, I'm fucking poggy woggy, man. So after that, like, he didn't even kill my field. So like, I have 3 characters still on the field, and like, I'm at like 1-4. And then he's out like 5 too, so I was like, okay, I'll just play, like since I had a level 0, I'll just play another one of this climax, and then I have 3 of these, swing for 2-2-2, and then he just kind of ate a little bit. I ate a lot of damage as well. It was a very quick game, because we just kept eating damage, but on his last turn he got really unfortunate. Like, he had 2 cards left in deck, 1 climax, he Brainstorm for 5, because he was playing the Shion Brainstorm, and then he hit 3 on the Brainstorm, so he's like, and he hit 3 on the Brainstorm and he refreshed the climax.
Oh,
So he's out like 4, then he triggers 1, so he's out 5. And then with like a 25 card deck and 3 climaxes, I have double Nino, and I have like the Ichika, and he's at 3-2, so he just died.
yeah. Fortunately, this year was not a best of 3, which is a best of 1, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think you would be able to take him on again if you did a best of 3?
I think with this deck, like, just has a good matchup because he was playing the Lamy combo. Like, the on reverse gets bounce. And like, that Lamy combo probably by itself cannot scale my field very well.
Yeah.
If I play around it well enough, I think I can just snowball it from level 1 since this card is just so good.
Especially if he does try to like funnel power into one card, you do have a 2k backup.
Yeah, he did run the Nene level 0 that's like pumps 2-5 rested. Like, that card kind of was a problem because he played like a 6-5 body, and then suddenly that 6-5 body becomes a 9k body. And so at level 2 he kind of scaled this, but in the end, like, I just hand down court and swing back for 12k. He couldn't really do much.
Alright. He played a bunch of bad decks, played Hololive, Mushoku, Nijisaki, Quintuplets, Assault Lily, all these top decks. Any last like remarks about the deck you want to give?
Think like I highly recommend that people give this deck a try because I think it's really fun to play. It's not as like easy as like a typical standby deck, I think, because this deck you kind of play it like a 1k1 a little bit since this combo comes out really early. And so it doesn't feel as bad playing aggressive at level 0 and your opponent going to level 1 first, so it kind of offers you more leeway. Because a lot of the standby decks, I think, the problem is like if they play too slow and their opponent levels up first, if they're playing a 1k1, if they tri lane and slam a climax, you can potentially just go to 2 for no reason.
Yes.
And so with this deck, you can kind of control that a little bit more. And I think this deck probably rivals Mushoku for the best deck in the format right now.
Big words, but a man who has the record to put that behind his back, whatever it's called. Alright, any last shoutouts you want to give before we wrap up this video?
Shoutouts? Yeah, like, thanks for everyone who tested with me, like UA, like Ethan, like Joey. And like, it was actually a funny thing because last year my Quintuplets deck was put together by Joey and I won with it. And this year again he was like, why don't you just play this deck? And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a try. And he pretty much like built this deck for me, and then I won with it again. So
Foggy
what can I
Woggies,
say?
you and Joey, powerful combo.
And like, thanks for everyone that believed in the two-peat, in the back-to-back. I know many people cheered me on.
Unfortunately,
So I appreciate it.
you could not play against the 2019 national champion.
Yeah, He lost to the Gen 5 guy, so I did kind of get him back on the finals.
Alright. Don't forget to use the promo code StrictlyBroken SBTCG Yoomin for 5% off all Strictly Broken TCG items. He is a sponsored player for Strictly Broken, as well as I am. You can see all of our content on our YouTube channel and catch us out on twitch.tv/SBTCG. Alright, you want to say farewell to everyone, Yoomin?
Yep, thank you for watching the video. Hope you try out this deck for yourself, and that's it.
Alright, see you guys.